me who I am, of whose legacy I am the guardian of, for the sake of the generations yet to come. Without memory, there is no identity. And without identity, we were mere dust on the surface of infinity. Yom HaZikaron, L'Shoah Ugvura. Today, we fulfill that obligation by remembering our martyrs and survivors. As a daughter and granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, I stop in awe and think about the survivors, what they lived through, and how life pulled them to continue. I remember my grandfather's screams at night and recall his resolve on his deathbed, his last words to me, Am Yisrael Chai. May the memory of our loved ones who perished in the Holocaust be a blessing. May we continue to honor their legacy in our own lives and the lives of future generations. Tonight, we are honored to have with us Mr. George Gluck, who will be speaking to us about his and his family's survival. As we are about to hear Mr. Gluck's survival story, and he was from Hungary, we have a short video explaining the setting, the historical context of what happened to the Jews of Hungary. Thank you. Candles in memory. We have 6 candles for the 6 million, but because I was overwhelmed with a number of people who really wanted to light, and I didn't want to refuse anybody, so we have a couple. There'll be a few more lighting, but 6 represents the 6, and then there are a few others, just so you understand.
My mother comes up as well, is that down here? Three generations, and I wanted to let you. Thank you for the feedback. Feedback is a gift. So we're lighting candles in memory, and my family actually, I never felt that we were descendants of Holocaust survivors. Baruch Hashem, all All my grandparents did not go through the Holocaust. And towards the end of my, you hear an echo? So towards the end of my grandfather's life, my grandfather was Elchanan ben Zevdo Helprin. I asked him, what is this painting that he has on his wall? And he told me it's a painting of his town in Poland, in Krasna. I said, who painted it? He said it was painted by someone who painted it for his sister, Stisha. And I'd like to light a candle in her memory tonight. My grandfather left Poland before the war, but his sister and their family and the children were not able to get to leave in time. And he told us that she and the rest of the community in Krasna rounded up one day into their shul, and gasoline fuel was poured around the shul, and they were all burnt up in that shul. And I'd like to, tonight, my mother light a candle in her memory and all those who were in Krasna.
Michelle? Michelle? And next will be Moshe.
I'm going to light a candle in honor of my grandmother, my beloved Grandma Hannah, who survived Struthof concentration camp as one of only 100 survivors. And in memory of her parents, Israel Meir and Sarah Moore, and her siblings and nephews and nieces, who were all killed. They were taken to the forest and shot whilst my grandmother was on her way home from work. And she went into an inn where they had to feed the horses, and she heard that the whole town of Rokishka in Lithuania had been taken to the woods and shot. So in her honor and in memory of all her family, I'm going to light this candle.
I'm lighting a Zikaron in memory of my father's parents, David Eliezer Abeles and Chaya Abeles, and my father's younger brother, Aaron. On the 8th of July 1944, you designed with Talmuz, Tavshi and Daled Yom Shabbat. They got off the train in the Auschwitz concentration camp. My father and his older brother were directed to the right. David Eliezer, Chaya, and Aaron were directed to the left. My father never saw them again.
I'm lighting a candle in memory of my great-great-grandparents, Yechiel Mechel and Malka Noe from Czechoslovakia, and their children, Shmuel Shmolka, Bela, Yehudit, Alexander Yosef, Shimon, and Hanani Yom Tov. Shmuel Shmolka was my grandmother's father, and as far as we know, he died in Auschwitz, and in memory of his wife, my great-grandmother Fega, who, as far as we also know, was murdered at Auschwitz, and her siblings, Moshe, Yaakov, Yitzchak, Hannah, and Rivka, and their spouses and their children. And in memory of Hanani Yom Tov, the brother of Shmuel Shmalka, who was my grandfather's father, who was taken with his two brothers in 1942 from Czechoslovakia to dig trenches for the Germans on the Russian front and was never seen again. And in memory of his wife, Rachel, who was killed in Auschwitz, and her siblings, Yaakov Yosef, Tzvi, Rachel, Perel, and Shprinza, and their spouses and their children. And in memory of my grandmother's brother, Mordechai ben Tzion, who left his precious new tefillin on the train when he arrived in Auschwitz, and when he tried to go back to get them was told, "You won't be needing those here." And in memory of my grandfather's siblings, Esther, Tzvi Ahimelech, Rachel, and Sarah, who were all killed in Auschwitz. And I light this candle in memory of my amazing grandparents, Toba Rachel, known as Ruchi, and Yekatiel Zalman, known as Zoli, who against all odds survived many horrors and were able to build a new life together. First cousins who lied about being brothers and sisters so that they could get to England together, and then who eventually became husband and wife. Had 4 children, 25 grandchildren, over 100 great-grandchildren, and countless great-great-grandchildren that we've stopped counting. My daddy would have stood in this room and looked around the room and said, Chasdei Hashem. There's so many Jews, so many people, Shomer Torah mitzvahs living in Eretz Israel. He would have been he is really, really proud.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of my grandfather's sister.
Sorry to be the one to always ask you, please put the mic to your mouth so we can hear.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of my grandfather's sister, Etla Gottesdiener Findling, and her husband, David Findling. They were Polish nationals who lived in Cologne, Germany, with their 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. In October 1938, Etla's husband, David, was deported from Germany back to his native Poland, together with other male Polish nationals. He returned to his village of Freistadt in Poland and was killed by the Nazis, together with the rest of his village, in 1942. Etla managed to get the 5 children and herself over the border into Belgium, where they had cousins, in various stages before the war started. Miraculously, all 5 children survived the war. The 3 boys were placed in a children's home and were later sent to the United States on one of the last kinderboat transports out of Lisbon. The 2 girls were placed in a convent until the end of the war, where my grandfather managed to find them and have them sent on to the US to join their brothers. Unfortunately, my great-aunt Etla was not so lucky. She was rounded up by the Nazis in 1942 in July, and she died in the gas chambers of Auschwitz immediately on arrival. Yehi Zikaron Baruch.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of my father's father.
Can't hear you, sorry.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of my father's father, Simon David Goldwasser, my grandfather. And my father's 2 brothers, Simon Goldwasser, he was 19 years old, and Abel Goldwasser, who was 15 years old. They were transported from Oslo on the ship Donau with just under 600 Jews to Stettin in Poland. And from Poland, they were transported to Auschwitz, and they never came back.
I'm lighting a candle in memory of my grandfather, Kalman Ben David. I'm named after him, my mother's father. He was born in a village called Wyszacze in the district of Przemyśl in Poland, where Sarah's father is also from. He moved to Vienna in the 30s when he met my grandmother, who was from Ukraine. They got married in the autumn of 1938. Very soon after, also in the autumn of around October 38, just like Miriam's relatives, the Austrian government, or the Nazi authorities, rounded up the Polish Jews who didn't have Austrian nationality, kicked them out. My grandmother managed to obtain permission and therefore was able to remain. My grandfather was sent back to Poland. They reached a place near the border called Szpazin, where it was effectively no man's land. The Poles didn't really want to let them in. It was the Polish winter, and at a certain point, after October 38, before the spring of 39, he died. Fortunately for me, in the very short time that my grandparents were together, my grandmother managed to escape in the winter of 39, and she was pregnant, and that very small period of time they were married is the reason I'm here now. And this is a mirror of my grandfather, Kalman Ben David. He's a Baruch.
I'm lighting a candle in the memory of my great-grandfather Chaim Yov Kimmerman, who I am named after. Even though all of his family passed away in the Shoah, he survived, and today he has 2 children, 70 grandchildren, and over 70 great-grandchildren. Kenahara.
My grandfather Zadiov was born in Sosnoce in Poland, and he used to tell us that he survived the war even though his entire family were killed. He survived the war because of Kibbutz Avaim, when the Nazis came to take his father to the work camp. His father was sick at the time, and he offered to go in his father's place. And even though his parents were against it, he went in his father's place and went through many work camps and concentration camps. And he barely survived, but at the last minute when they were in the middle of the death march, he couldn't move anymore, and he just lay down in the snow. And a Nazi came up to him and picked up his hand, was about to shoot him, picked up his hand and said, "This one's not even worth a bullet." And a few days after, they were liberated in Buchenwald. And he made his way to Australia, built a family, and Baruch Hashem, all his grandchildren and great-grandchildren are in Eretz Yisrael.
Truth is, I don't really know who to light for because there were so many people to light for. And I'm thinking of my great-grandfather on my mother's side, who at the pain of death, buried in the dark and at night. His name was Yaakov, and they were rural Jews in Germany from my mother's side. Noam is named for him, Noam Yaakov. And he buried my great-grandmother, who was sick in 1942, in the dark, in the pain of death, because Nazis forbid Jewish burial. It was forbidden. And they were helped by local people who actually took from the parish the parochet and covered the coffin with it so it looked like it was a Christian burial. And that's how it went. And then he somehow did it and got on a train. A whole story. I don't even know don't remember all the details. But the idea that somebody to bring his wife to Jewish burial at the pain of death and to the fear and terror, it always struck me. So I want to light a candle for my great-grandfather Yaakov, who perished in Treblinka. We're now going to see a short clip on Hungarian Jewry. It's 3 minutes long, but it's to give us understanding and context, as Mr. Gluck is a survivor from Hungary, and we wanted to give a little bit of historical context.
Jewish life has existed for over 1,000 years in Hungary. By the 19th and 20th centuries, Jews held prominent roles in the arts, science, politics, and business. Arguably the most famous of whom was Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism. However, anti-Semitism was never very far from the surface, and by 1935, Hungary emerged as an ally of Nazi Germany.
We were made to believe by government propaganda that whatever we hear that the Nazis are doing to the Jewish people, those are rumors which the Allied forces are trying to spread among the population. Do not believe it.
In 1939, the Hungarian government introduced a program of forced labor, conscripting over 40,000 Jewish men and taking them to the Eastern Front. Many died of exposure, were killed in battle, or were executed by Hungarian soldiers retreating from the advancing Soviet army. In the summer of 1941, in Kamenets-Podolsk, the first mass murders of the Final Solution began. 18,000 of those massacred that summer were Hungarian-speaking Jews.
Oh, don't speak about it, let's forget. No, don't forget. You did something horrible. You killed your brother's children or your neighbor's children.
Although oppression of the Jewish people in Hungary was rampant and severe, the vast majority, unlike elsewhere in Europe, were still alive in early 1944. All of that was to change. Sensing that Hungary was considering leaving the Axis, Germany invaded. Led by Adolf Eichmann, the Nazis and their Hungarian collaborators began rounding up Jews.
When Eichmann arrived, immediately came out the order to put on the distinguishing yellow star.
Deportations began, and families were torn apart. Most ended up at Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Corti did not want to help us. They were the last days of their existence. Could be saved million people, 1 million. Instead, I was a witness that these wonderful, innocent, beautiful, talented children were sent to the gas chambers.
Approximately 400,000 Hungarian Jews were murdered within a period of 10 weeks at the hands of the Nazis. Many more were killed by their fellow citizens in the Arrow Cross. Of an estimated 800,000 Hungarian Jews alive at the beginning of 1944, less than 200,000 remained in the spring of 1945. More than 3/4 of Hungary's Jewish population had been murdered, all in the last year of the war.
I'd like to call Yael, Mr. Gluck's granddaughter, to come up and introduce her grandfather. Mr. Gluck, so come.
Rishas, Rabbanim, Rishas, Grandma and Grandpa, and the whole Kehiliat. Good evening. Thank you all for being here to hear my grandfather's story tonight. Tonight and tomorrow, as the country takes the time to remember 6 million Kedoshim who were murdered by the Nazis, it is a unique opportunity that we have a chance to still hear the stories from those who survived. And B'chasdei Hashem, they managed to get through the horrors of the war. In a world of growing Holocaust denial and fast-rising anti-Semitism, there is nothing more humbling than to have the honor and privilege to stand here as the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor who feels that I and the rest of his beautiful family, Baruch Hashem, are the biggest revenge that he has against the Nazis, Yimach Shemam. Growing up, Grandpa really instilled in all of us a strong sense of need for continuation of the Jewish people and of our Yiddishkeit. And I'm beyond grateful for his pushing of our family to move here to Eretz Yisrael to stabilize our roots here in this land where we belong. Grandpa, b'chavod.
Hear me? A huge privilege to be here tonight. Together, we have a big zchus, myself and Mr. Gluck, George, to have a chabura, to learn Torah together, as you can see in the picture here. And our relationship is through Torah and through Kehiliat Ahavat Tzion, and that is what has brought us here tonight. Because I'm not sure that you really, if I'm correct, you haven't really spoken and told your story too much in public. So this is a really, really big zchus and privilege for us. So maybe we'll take us back, if you will, to the beginning, to pre-war, and maybe explain a little bit about your upbringing, how old you were, what your family makeup was, how many siblings, and so forth.
Before I start, I'd like to thank Hashem for allowing me to be here tonight. As far as family life before the war that you would like to hear about, it would be a very pleasant, I would describe it as a pleasant, quiet, family life. As you heard about Hungary, it had a double meaning. Some Hungarians were as bad as the Germans. Some Hungarians were much better and treated the Jews quite well. As a matter of fact, my father owned a business, furniture business in Hungary, and he had quite a few Hungarian workers. Two of those workers were helpful in our escaping the ghetto. The way this worked out was as follows.
Maybe can I take you back 1 minute before you go to the escape? Sorry.
Okay.
How old were you at the time?
8 and a half.
8 and a half. And you had any brothers or sisters?
I had one brother who was 7 and one brother who was 1.
1.
No sisters.
And did your parents have other family members there? Did they survive the war?
My mother's family lived in Czechoslovakia, and unfortunately, most of them did not return. They were killed quite early, much earlier than the Hungarian Jews. My father's family was living in Hungary. And most of them survived because they were hiding and knew the ropes, let's put it that way. We survived also because of hiding and Hashem's help.
So you were a regular child, you played soccer outside, you went to school?
Regular child.
Do you remember your family Shabbos table before the war? Was it normal or?
Normal. I would say everything was what you would expect to be normal before the Nazis came in.
You remember your father making kiddush?
Yes.
Mother lighting candles, sitting around the Shabbos table?
I went to shul. I went to shul with my father regularly. And in fact, that shul, we were living in the city called Nyíregyháza, which is northeast Hungary. The shuls in Hungary, I would like to make a comment. Shuls in Hungary were very nice, very large, very beautiful, most of them. And as a matter of fact, the Germans during Kristallnacht destroyed all the shuls they could. In contrast, the Hungarians did not destroy the shuls, they just locked them up, for the most part. There were incidents of destroying some, but generally, there was a distinction between the Hungarians and the Germans in this respect. It was a very normal existence until the Germans came in. They were, yes, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you, you or your parents, did you know what was going on in Poland and other places?
Yes, we did know what was going on, and it helped us in some ways because we owned a radio, these large radios in those days, and listened to the BBC in Hungarian every night. My parents listened to the BBC to see what was going on in the world. And at the same time, we were putting up every night Polish Jews who escaped Poland, went to Czechoslovakia, to Hungary, to Romania, to Bulgaria, and then hoping to go to Palestine. And every night we had many Polish Jews who were telling us stories about what was happening in Poland. And I believe that this information that they heard helped them to plan the survival.
Helped your parents?
Yes, it helped them. Yes, basically it was a help, and of course, perhaps our putting them up and feeding them also helped.
And what happens when the Germans come into Hungary?
Okay, the Germans came into Hungary after the Hungarian government refused to send out Jews to Auschwitz. They said they'll take care of the Jews themselves, which they did, and a lot of them were, as you saw in the film, the Nyilas, which was the Hungarian equivalent of the Nazis, were terrible people. And on the whole, we were put, well, let me start at the beginning. The Nazis came in April of 1944, and immediately, the same day that they came, they ordered all the Jews to report to the shul and just don't bring anything except maybe a pillow or a blanket or something. And all the Jews were put into the shul and the surrounding open area, and there was a wall between the open area and the rest of the city. It held all the Jews. It became the ghetto, and that's where the Jews were sent to Auschwitz from there. We were put into the same ghetto, and the same night, two of my father's loyal workers came in at 2 o'clock at night to help us climb the wall and get out of the ghetto, which was successful. Part of the plan was that my parents would meet, they would separate. My father was an officer in the labor brigade, Jewish labor brigade in Hungary, and he had a uniform. He ordered an army car to take him to Budapest. My mother, with 3 children, boarded a train to Budapest, and they met up in Budapest. This was obviously, they never talked about it, but obviously this was part of their plan. They planned this out beforehand. Because to travel together, husband and wife and children, would be too